misled. False Christs can make only a visible appearance. In contrast, Jesus' presence will not be visible. Referring to a larger tribulation that would break out at the end of the present system of things, Jesus says, "The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken." Matthew 24:29. The apostles, hearing those chilling words, do not know exactly what will occur, but it certainly will be awesome. How will these shocking events affect mankind? Jesus says, "People will become faint out of fear and expectation of the things coming upon the inhabited earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken." Luke 21:26. Indeed, Jesus is describing what will be the darkest period of human existence. Encouragingly, Jesus makes it clear to the apostles that not all will be lamenting when the Son of Man comes with power and great glory. Matthew 24:30. He had already indicated that God will intervene on account of the chosen ones. Matthew 24:22. So how should such faithful disciples react to the shocking developments that Jesus is outlining? Jesus encourages his followers. As these things start to occur, stand up straight and lift up your heads, because your deliverance is getting near. Luke 21:28. How, though, would Jesus' disciples who are living during this foretold period be able to determine the nearness of the end? Jesus gives an illustration about a fig tree. Just as soon as its young branch grows tender and sprouts its leaves, you know that summer is near. Likewise also you, when you see all these things, know that he is near at the doors. Truly I say to you that this generation will by no means pass away until all these things happen. Matthew 24:32-34. 258. Thus, when his disciples see the many different features of the sign being fulfilled, they should realize that the end is near. Admonishing the disciples who will be alive during that momentous period, Jesus says, "Concerning that day and hour nobody knows, neither the angels of the heavens nor the Son, but only the Father. For just as the days of Noah were, so the presence of the Son of Man will be. For as they were in those days before the flood, eating and drinking, men marrying and women being given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and they took no note until the flood came and swept them all away, so the presence of the Son of Man will be." Matthew 24:36-39. The event that Jesus uses as a parallel. The historic flood of Noah's day had a global impact. The apostles listening to Jesus on the Mount of Olives must undoubtedly recognize the need to keep alert. Jesus says, "Pay attention to yourselves that your hearts never become weighed down with overeating and heavy drinking and anxieties of life, and suddenly that day be instantly upon you as a snare. For it will come upon all those dwelling on the face of the whole earth. Keep awake, then, all the time making supplication that you may succeed in escaping all these things that must occur and in standing before the Son of Man." Luke 21:34-36. Jesus is once again showing that what he is foretelling is not of limited scope. He is not prophesying about events that would occur in a few decades and that would affect only the city of Jerusalem or the Jewish nation. No, he is pointing to developments that will come upon all those dwelling on the face of the whole earth. He says that his disciples will need to keep alert, to be on the watch, and to be ready. Jesus underscores this warning with another illustration. Know one thing. If the householder had known in what watch the thief was coming, he would have kept awake and not allowed his house to be broken into. On this account, you too prove yourselves ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not think to be it. Matthew 24:43-44. Jesus goes on to give his disciples reason for optimism. He assures them that when his prophecy is being fulfilled, there will be a slave who is alert and active. Jesus draws on a situation that the apostles can readily picture. Who really is the faithful and discreet slave whom his master appointed over his domestics, to give them their food at the proper time? Happy is that slave if his master on coming finds him doing so. Truly I say to you, he will appoint him over all his belongings. If, though, the slave develops an evil attitude and mistreats others, the master will punish him with the greatest severity. Matthew 24:45-51. Compare Luke 45, 46. However, Jesus is not saying that a group of his followers will develop an evil disposition. What, then, is the lesson that Jesus wants to impress upon his disciples? He wants them to stay alert and active, as he makes clear in yet another illustration. How does a disgusting thing appear, and what events follow its appearance? How will people react when they witness the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy? Jesus gives what illustration to help his disciples discern when the end is near? What indicates that the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy is global? What admonition does Jesus provide for his disciples living near the end of the system of things? 259. Jesus has been answering his apostles' question regarding the sign of his presence and of the conclusion of the system of things. With this in mind, he now gives them wise admonition by means of an additional illustration. Its fulfillment would be observable by those living during his presence. He introduces the illustration, saying, "The kingdom of the heavens may be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were discreet." Matthew 25. 1, 2. Jesus does not mean that half of his disciples who inherit the kingdom of the heavens are foolish and the other half are discreet. Rather, he is making the point that in connection with the kingdom, each of his disciples has the capacity to choose to be vigilant or to be distracted. Jesus has no doubt, though, that each of his servants can remain faithful and receive his Father's blessings. In the illustration, all 10 virgins go out to welcome the bridegroom and to join the wedding procession. When he arrives, the virgins will light the root with their lamps, honoring him as he brings his bride to the house prepared for her. How do things work out, though? Jesus explains. The foolish took their lamps but took no oil with them, whereas the discreet are less in vigilance. The virgins Matthew 25. 1-13 took oil in their flasks along with their lamps. While the bridegroom was delaying, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. Matthew 25. 3-5 The bridegroom does not arrive as soon as expected. There seems to be a long delay, during which the virgins fall asleep. The apostles may recall what Jesus related about a man of noble birth who went away and eventually got back after having secured the kingly power. Luke 19. 11-15. In the illustration of the 10 virgins, Jesus describes what happens when the bridegroom finally arrives. Right in the middle of the night there was a shout. "Here is the bridegroom. Go out to meet him." Matthew 25. 6 What is the situation of the virgins as to their preparedness and vigilance? Jesus continues. Then all those virgins got up and put their lamps in order. The foolish said to the discreet, "Give us some of your oil, because our lamps are about to go out." The discreet answered, saying, "Perhaps there may not be enough for both us and you. Go instead to those who sell it, and buy some for yourselves." Matthew 25. 7-9. So the 5 foolish virgins are not vigilant and are not prepared for the arrival of the bridegroom. They lack sufficient oil for their lamps and need to try to find some. Jesus relates. While they were going off to buy it, the bridegroom came. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the rest of the virgins also came, saying, "Sir, Sir, open to us." In answer he said, "I tell you the truth, I do not know you." Matthew 25. 10-12 What a sad outcome for not remaining prepared and vigilant. The apostles can see that the bridegroom whom Jesus mentions refers to himself. Earlier he had even likened himself to a bridegroom. Luke 5. 34, 35 And the wise virgins. When speaking about the little flock, who would be given the kingdom, Jesus used the words, "Be dressed and ready and have your lamps burning." Luke 12. 32, 35 So in this illustration about the virgins, the apostles can grasp that Jesus is referring to ones such as themselves. Hence, what is the message that Jesus is conveying with this illustration? Jesus does not leave any doubt about that. He concludes his illustration by saying, "Keep on the watch, therefore, because you know neither the day nor the hour." Matthew 25. 13. Clearly, Jesus is admonishing his faithful followers that in connection with his presence, they will need to keep on the watch. He will be coming, and they need to be prepared and vigilant. Like the 5 discreet virgins. In order not to lose sight of their precious hope and miss out on the reward that can be theirs. Jesus gives the illustration of the 10 virgins. How do the 5 discreet virgins differ from the 5 foolish ones as respects vigilance and preparedness? To whom does the bridegroom refer, and to whom do the virgins refer? What message is Jesus conveying with the illustration of the 10 virgins? 112, 261. While still with his 4 apostles on the Mount of Olives, Jesus tells them another illustration. A few days earlier, while he was at Jericho, he gave the illustration of the minas to show that the kingdom was yet far off in the future. The illustration he now relates has a number of similar features. It is part of his answer to the question about his presence and the conclusion of the system of things. It highlights that his disciples must be diligent with what he entrusts to them. Jesus begins. It is just like a man about to travel abroad who summoned his slaves and entrusted his belongings to them. Matthew 25:14. Given that Jesus had already likened himself to a man who traveled abroad to secure kingly power for himself, the apostles could easily see that Jesus is the man being spoken of now. Luke 19:12. Before the man in the illustration travels abroad, he commits to his slaves valuable belongings. During the 3.5 years of his ministry, Jesus focused on preaching the good news of God's kingdom, and he trained his disciples to do this work. Now he is going away, confident that they will carry on doing what he trained them to do. Matthew 10:7. Luke 10:1, 8, 9. Compare John 4:38. 14. 12. In the illustration, how does the man distribute his belongings? Jesus relates. He gave 5 talents to one, 2 to another, and 1 to still another, to each according to his own ability, and he went abroad. Matthew 25:15. What will these slaves do with what is entrusted to them? Will they be diligent in using them in their master's interests? Jesus tells the apostles. Immediately the one who received the 5 talents went and did business with them and gained 5 more. Likewise, the one who received the 2 gained 2 more. But the slave who received just 1 went off and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Matthew 25:16-18. What will happen when the master returns? After a long time, Jesus continues, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Matthew 25:19. The first 2 did all they could, each according to his own ability. Each slave was diligent, hard-working, and productive with what has been entrusted to him. The one who received 5 talents doubled that, as did the one who received 2 talents. Back then, a worker would have to labor about 19 years to earn the equivalent of 1 talent. The master has the same commendation for each of them. Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful over a few things. I will appoint you over many a lesson in diligence. The talents. Matthew 25:14-30, 262. Things. Enter into the joy of your master. Matthew 25:21. It is different, though, with the slave who received 1 talent. He says, Master, I knew you to be a demanding man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not winnow. So I grew afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. Matthew 25:24-25. He has not even deposited the money with bankers so as to accumulate at least some profit for his master. He has, in effect, worked against his master's interests. Fittingly, the master designates him a wicked and sluggish slave. What he hid is taken away and given to the slave who is willing to apply himself diligently. The master sets out his standard. To everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Matthew 25:26-29. Jesus' disciples have much to think about, even in connection with this one illustration. They can see that what Jesus is entrusting to them. The precious privilege of making disciples. is of great value, and he expects them to be diligent in using